Yo, what it do? It's your boy Lil Tradey. I'm back with another video, and this will be my first video dropped in like a month, as I've been focused on a lot of NFL lately. But since the NBA season's coming back, I decided to drop my first season about the 2023 NBA season. And to kick us off, we're going to be talking about the New Orleans Pelicans, because this team, they're no joke, like for real. Because New Orleans Pelicans, sure, they're not like an elite team or nothing. They're not some super team, obviously. And I don't think they're going to have the best record in the league or nothing. But New Orleans Pelicans, they're real stacked, because they got a promising young core of Zion and Brandon Ingram, and also a couple other role players. And you also have veteran CJ McCollum and also Valanciunas to bring the veteran experience to this team. And with all that, I think the New Orleans Pelicans, they might be a real dangerous team in the 2022-23 NBA season, because this team, they has a lot of expectations to make the playoffs, and I think they should make the playoffs, because the team that they got, there's really no excuse for them not to make the playoffs, because they got a promising young team and also a couple of other role players. But before I get started with this video, make sure to like, subscribe to my channel, hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you follow me on Instagram. My link's down below in the description box. Without further ado, let's get started with this video and let's talk about these players on this team. And to start us off, we got Dyson Daniels. And Dyson Daniels, I don't know much about him, as he was drafted last year from the New Orleans Pelicans. And I don't know a lot about him because he was in the G League. But I synced a couple of his G League highlights, and I gotta say, man, he's going to be a real key piece on this team. As sure, he's not the best shot creator or nothing, but as a defender, he is kind of a good defender, I ain't gonna lie. As he could switch on multiple positions, he could switch on pick and rolls, he could switch on rotations, like he could do anything on defense. I'm not calling him Giannis or Rudy Gobert or nothing, or not even his teammate Herb Jones, but he's going to be a real key piece to their defense. And with all the defensive holes to this team, especially with guys like Zion, CJ, and a little bit of Brandon Ingram, and also Valanciunas, I think Dyson Daniels, he's going to be a real key piece for their defense to get a lot better alongside Herb Jones and Jose Alvarado. And speaking of defense, that brings me to Jackson Hayes. Now look, Jackson Hayes, sure, he's not living up to that top 10 pick, as he was drafted with the number 9 overall pick back in 2019, the same class as Zion Williamson, obviously. And sure, Jackson Hayes is not a superstar or not even an all-star or nothing, but Jackson Hayes, though, he is still one of their key pieces to his team. As a defender, he's one of their best defenders on his team, as he could switch on any position, as he could switch to point guard to the center, and he's one of the most athletic players in the league. And with all that athleticism and his defensive mobility, as he could block shots good, he's a great rim protector. He could also switch on smaller guys, and if Jackson Hayes could keep this up, to be honest, he could become a Defensive Player of the Year candidate if he keep this going. And speaking of defenders, that brings us to Larry Nance Jr. And Larry Nance Jr., he might be a big piece on this team. As sure, he's not an all-star or nothing, or an all-star caliber player, but Larry Nance Jr. as a defender, he can help this team dramatically. As sure, he wasn't the defender that he was with the Los Angeles Lakers or Cleveland Cavaliers, but he's gotten a lot better ever since he came to the New Orleans Pelicans, being that veteran leader, helping them on the defensive side of the ball. And as a rebounder, I think he's pretty underrated at that aspect, as against the Phoenix Suns in the first round, he was kind of bullying them, as he averaged over 5 offensive rebounds a game, and he averaged over 10 rebounds a game. And if Larry Nance can keep this up, he might get a bag in the offseason if the Pelicans can have a surprising year. And speaking of rebounding, that brings us to our next player, Jonas Valanciunas. And Valanciunas, I think he's one of the more underrated players in the league as well. As Valanciunas, sure, he's not the best defender out there, but Valanciunas as a rebounder, he's pretty underrated at that. I don't know why, because Jonas Valanciunas, he's arguably the most underrated rebounder in the league. Because against the Phoenix Suns, man, he was straight up bullying them alongside Larry Nance Jr. As Valanciunas averaged over 13 rebounds a game, he averaged over 5 offensive rebounds a game. And Valanciunas, he might be a real integral piece on his team. And if he can keep it up as well, man, expect a lot for the future from the New Orleans Pelicans. And sure, he might not get better on defensive side of the ball, which I kind of not really going to expect. But Valanciunas, if he can keep this up, the Pelicans, they could be real threats in the Western Conference. And now moving on to our next player, and that's Jose Alvarado. And when we talk about stealing candy from a baby, Jose Alvarado fits that bill perfectly. As in the first round against the Phoenix Suns, he was giving Chris Paul a lot of troubles, especially stealing the ball from behind him, doing this vintage move, stealing the ball from players when they're dribbling the ball up the court, and he sneaks up from behind them and steals the ball, and it would lead to a bucket or something. And Jose Alvarado, he's also one of the best perimeter defenders at his position, as he give a lot of guards a lot of troubles, especially when your team has CJ McCollum and Devontae Graham, two of the bottom 10 defenders in this league. But with Jose Alvarado in the mix, I think he can help that backcourt be better on defense. Well, I'm not talking about CJ or Devontae Graham being better on defense, but he could kind of backpack that backcourt defense. And speaking of defense, that brings us to our next defensive player, Herb Jones. And Herb Jones, man, he is the X factor on this team. Like, for real. Sure, he's not the greatest shot creator out there, but as a defender, he's one, or arguably a top 10 defender in this league. Like, for real. Because this man, he can do it all on defense. He could block shots, he could switch, he could rotate. Like, he could do it all on defensive side of the ball. And I expect Herb Jones to make an all-defensive team, especially an all-defensive first team. He's one of the best defenders at his position, and he could just do it all on defense. And in the first round against the Phoenix Suns, man, he was kind of bitching Mikal Bridges. I ain't gonna lie. I remember that one block that he had on him when Mikal tried to shoot that three, and Herb Jones from out of nowhere came in and swatted Mikal's stuff, and that was almost a save as well. So Herb Jones, shout out to him for that. And if Herb Jones keep up this play, I can see it backhanded to him as well. I'm not talking about a max contract or nothing. I'm talking about like a 3-year, $70 million type of contract if he keep up this play, and if he keep up his defense as well. To be honest, him, Alvarado, Larry Nance, they could probably carry the Pelicans to top 10 defense in the league. Like, for real. We seen that with Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso with the Chicago Bulls, as when they were on the court, the Bulls were a top 10 defense in this league. So if Alvarado and Herb Jones could do that for the Pelicans, they could probably become a top 10 defense in this league by carrying them, because they don't got that many great defenders, especially Zion and Brandon Ingram, and also CJ McCollum, like I said. So if Herb Jones keep this up, there's going to be a backhanded to him. And now let's move on to Devontae Graham. And I don't got that much to say about Devontae Graham, other than he's a great shooter and also a good playmaker. And that's all he can really do. He's ass on defense, and he's kind of an inefficient ass shooter, as in some seasons or some games he be shooting below 40% from the field. So yeah, I don't got that much to say about Devontae Graham, other than he's going to probably be a solid starting point guard, or he could probably come off the bench, because Jose Alvarado, I should hand that starting spot to him. But moving on to our big three, and that's CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Zion Williamson. Let's start off with CJ first. CJ McCollum, man, talk about having a bag. Because I ain't gonna lie, when he was with Portland, Dame was kind of holding him back to showing his true aspects. Because as a playmaker, CJ McCollum, I think he's real underrated. Because I might see some games where CJ could probably run the point guard position, because he's real effective at that, because he averaged over 5 assists a game. So when the season comes, I expect CJ to play point guard in some games, or probably most games, because Devontae Graham, yeah, he is not cutting it. And CJ, as a scorer, he's definitely one of the more underrated scorers in this league. I'm not saying it's like James Harden type of level or Kevin Durant type of level, but CJ McCollum, he can score anywhere on the court. Floaters, mid-range shot, it's real deadly. And also as a three-point shooter, he's also good at that as well. Like, he can get to his spot anytime. He can also play off ball as well. So I expect a lot from CJ McCollum coming into the next year of the season, and I expect him to be a huge piece on his team. and be that third option behind Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. And speaking of Brandon Ingram, that brings me to him next. And bringing Brandon Ingram, he is going to be one hell of a sidekick. I'm talking about one of the best sidekicks in this league, because Brandon Ingram, man, he is showing that he's a top 20 to 25 player in this league. And as a scorer, I think Brandon Ingram's real underrated at that, because his mid-range shot, it's real deadly. Because just like CJ, he can get to a spot, and he can pull up from anywhere like how Kevin Durant can do. I'm not saying as good as Kevin Durant, but Brandon Ingram, he could pull up from anywhere. He could also pull up from three as well. He could drive to the rim, throw down a mean dunk, as he could throw down a lot of vicious dunks. And in what we just saw in the playoffs this year, Brandon Ingram, he balled out, because against the Phoenix Suns, who were a top 5 defense, Brandon Ingram averaged 27 points on 47% shooting from the field, and he was cooking the Defensive Player of the Year candidate, Mikal Bridges. So Brandon Ingram, man, he is going to be one hell of a sidekick, and I expect a lot from Brandon Ingram. And now that brings us to the man of the hour, Zion Williamson. And I expect Zion to take a huge leap this year, because Zion Williamson, man, if he could just stay healthy, and we just seen the picture by picture as we seen Zion from last year compared to this year, and what the Pelicans did when they got to the playoffs and pushed the Phoenix Suns, who were the #1 seed, to 6 games. I think that probably motivated Zion to get into shape and get better as a player. And right now, he is really showing it. And I expect Zion to be a dark horse for the MVP. I don't got him as a top 3 or top 5 MVP candidate or nothing, but I won't be shocked if Zion could be in that conversation, because this Pelicans team is real stacked. And with that team, I don't get why Zion can't really be a top 5 MVP candidate, because if the Pelicans can finish as at least a top 3 seed in the Western Conference or a top 4 seed, man, Zion Williamson, him in the MVP conversation, that might be real true. And if Zion could just stay healthy and play at least 70 games, yep, Zion Williamson, I expect a lot of all NBA teams. And as a defender, he needs to work on that a little bit, because I still think Zion is not that great of a defender, especially in 2021, where last he played, he was kind of a liability, I ain't gonna lie. So I think Zion should work on that a little bit. But outside of that, he's still a great scorer. And in the paint, he is real good in the paint, as he shot over 60% from the field while averaging 27 points a game. So I think Zion's going to pick up where he left off and have an all-star caliber year. And I expect him to make an all-NBA team. Well, it depends if he can stay healthy. And he's not the only one that should be staying healthy. Also, Brandon Ingram, because he's been dealing with injuries lately, especially in the beginning of the year, where the Pelicans started off 1-12. And also CJ McCollum, he could probably deal with an injury soon. So if the big three can stay healthy and play at least 70 games, I expect the New Orleans Pelicans to finish as a top 4 seed, and Zion Williamson being the MVP candidate. And also shout out to Willie Green, because not only that, he's also a black coach. I gotta support my black coaches, man. As Willie Green, in his first year, he did one hell of a job, as he was able to some games out-coach Monty Williams. And with him in his second year as the New Orleans Pelicans head coach, I expect a lot from Willie Green. And he could probably end up as a top 5 or top 3 coach of the year candidate, as if he could keep this up. But do I think that the Pelicans can be a real threat in the NBA? Without a doubt. Because this team, they got everything. They got offense, they got defense, they got good coaching. So I expect the New Orleans Pelicans to be at least ranked a top 15 team in the NBA. Like, there's no excuse for them not to make the playoffs, because they got it all. Like, they got the talent, they got the veteran experience, they got defense. So New Orleans, I expect y'all to make the playoffs, because if y'all don't, I ain't gonna lie, this is gonna be a real disappointing year. And then y'all gonna go back to y'all trash ways, making boneheaded decisions after boneheaded decisions. And Zion could potentially leave y'all. But I don't think Zion's gonna leave y'all because he's in the perfect position to compete in the Western Conference. So yeah, I expect the New Orleans Pelicans to do big things this year. But that concludes this video. What y'all think? Do y'all think the New Orleans Pelicans are a big threat in the Western Conference? This your boy Lil Trady signing out. Stay safe and have a blessed day. Peace.